Take a look at this trash can. It's nice, isn't it? How much would you pay for it? $30, $40, $50? Well, how about $52,000? Or to be more precise, $51,606.12. Because the Pentagon thought it was worth that much. Well, more really, they paid Boeing more than $200,000 for 4 trash cans. The Pentagon paid nearly as much for a trash can than most people get as their salary. I'll grant the Pentagon that trash cans are nice. I use them all the time. But none of them are that nice, even if they were sold by Boeing. Boeing, which is famous for their faulty planes, should be just as famous for their profligate price gouging. They're not the only offender. Several military contractors, including Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, TransDigm, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman, are just as bad. Worse, it's not just the trash cans. The Pentagon is overpaying for everything. How much are these companies getting? A lot. Kathleen Hicks, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, said in March that of the $842 billion budget the Pentagon has, half of it, or $421 billion, will be going to defense contractors. That means tens of billions, if not more, in overcharges that the taxpayer is responsible for. How did it get to be like this? Why is the Pentagon paying so much for something that shouldn't cost so much? The military-industrial complex is too big for a single video, but I think we can eke out a few reasons, despite them being manifold. The way I see it, there are 3 reasons that stand a cut above the rest. 1. Non-competitive contracts. 2. A lack of accountability. And 3. A mismatch between contractors, the Pentagon, Congress, and the taxpayer. One of the biggest, if not the biggest reason for the overcharging can be traced back to something that we, as Americans, pride ourselves on: competition, or in this case, lack thereof. A core idea of free market economics is that 2 or more entities compete and the best one wins. Well, that's not how these government contracts work. Some of these are sole source procurement, a fancy way of saying that the contract is entered into without competition. Sometimes an employee might have to sign a non-compete, which is a way to stop those employees from competing with their former employer. This is like that, except instead of being forbidden from doing something, the business is given tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to deliver goods, and everyone else is prohibited from competing. When you have no one to compete with, what's your rationale for providing a good product at a low price? Patriotism? It sounds nice, and each of these companies love to blow smoke about how patriotic they are. But in the end, they still end up gouging the Pentagon and, by extension, the people. Patriotism doesn't make for multi-million-dollar bonuses on its own, after all. Monopoly contracts, however, do. This is the kind of stuff that the American people have had to shell out for. The aforementioned $52,000 trash can. The trash can is used on the E-3 surveillance and radar plane and used to cost us $300. According to Responsible Statecraft, which acquired the information about the trash can, quote, "When the 707 fell out of use in the United States, the trash can was no longer a quote-unquote commercial item, meaning that Boeing was not obligated to keep its prices at previous levels," end quote. In 2021, the Pentagon paid $36,640 per can for 11 trash cans. The math is simple. 15 trash cans at the 2010 price of $300 is $4,500. Still a lot, but manageable. After the increases, almost $610,000. Jamaica Bearings sold the DoD 13 radio filters for $49,000 each. They used to cost $350 each. That's a 140 times markup. Boeing overcharged the DoD by $500 million for Patriot missiles. Raytheon increased Stinger missile prices from $25,000 to more than $400,000. Yes, inflation was and is bad, but it's not that bad. It all amounts to untold billions of taxpayer dollars getting siphoned over to corporations during a time when the companies are boasting record revenues thanks to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The conflict is unlikely to end anytime soon, which means Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman are going to be making a lot more. Why am I singling them out? Because they account for nearly 30% of the 50% that goes to contractors. Part of the reason for the non-competitive landscape goes back to the 1990s. After the end of the Cold War, large defense contracts began to dry up. The US had come out on top and eternal peace was just around the corner. The defense industry began a period of consolidation. Les Aspin, a former Secretary of Defense, during a dinner he hosted for the nation's largest defense contractors at the time, described it as the Last Supper, and warned that the decline in defense spending at the time would only continue. William J. Perry, Aspin's deputy at the time, said, quote, "We expect defense companies to go out of business. We will stand by and watch it happen," end quote. And they did, leading to just the handful of too big to fail defense contractors that we have now. The reason that there's no competition is because the competition died out. The overall number in vendors has been declining over the past decade. And because of how specialized the defense industry has become, if there's something that only a single company can do, the DoD has two choices: pay the ransom, the prices, or risk missions. The defense contractors have the DoD and taxpayers over a barrel. The government can't do much about the competition issue. They can't force or will more defense contractors into existence, but that doesn't mean that there's no recourse. So why does this happen? Where's the accountability? That brings us to our second big problem. There is none, or where it does exist, it's lax or full of loopholes. This is especially prevalent when it comes to small dollar transactions. The Truthful Cost and Pricing Statute is a law which, quote, requires offerors to submit a certified cost or pricing data if procurement exceeds the truthful cost and pricing threshold and none of the exceptions to certified cost or pricing data requirements applies, end quote. What does that mean? It means that so long as the procurement is under the truthful cost and pricing threshold, contractors do not need to submit cost or pricing data. What's the threshold? Well, it used to be $750,000, but Congress increased it to $2 million. So what does that mean? It means that so long as the defense contractor is screwing taxpayers out of less than $2 million per procurement, they don't actually need to provide data as to what the parts actually cost. So in a way, we should be grateful. That $52,000 trash can could have been a lot more expensive. In a 2019 audit of 47 parts supplied by TransDigm, it was determined that the company made excess profits on 46 of them. That means they overcharged the taxpayer on 46 out of 47 parts, one of which had a profit margin of 4,436%. And that's just a small subset of parts that were examined. The real number is likely much higher. It's not that the DoD doesn't try to be accountable. It's the fact that Congress refuses to pass laws which allows them to be, giving corporations significant leeway in the information that they want to share. The DoD reported that Boeing alone denied almost 11,000 requests for pricing data. And then what can the DoD do about it? Nothing. Just take it. The lack of accountability is not natural. It's forced. There isn't enough good regulation around contracting and procurement. Which brings us to number 3, a mismatch in priorities between the taxpayers, the DoD, Congress, and the contractors. The Venn diagram doesn't overlap much here, unfortunately. What do the taxpayers want? The best bang for their buck. What does Congress want? To be reelected. What does the DoD want? To get more funding. And what do defense contractors want? To make a lot more money. Unfortunately, Congress, the DoD, and defense contractors are better aligned with each other than they are with the taxpayer. Whether through corporate lobbying or donations, defense contractors have a better position on Capitol Hill than the people do. When you can convince someone that safety is just a few $billion away and, hey, we'll support you in your race as well, it makes a hell of a case. It's small things like making the threshold for reporting costs so high. Why $2 million per procurement? Why not $1 million? Why not $500,000? Why is the requirement to provide the data, which the company already has in order to calculate their profit, paywalled at all? Why aren't they required to provide it as a cost of doing business? Why shouldn't the government and the taxpayer be aware of how much money is being spent and where it's going? Why do such loopholes even exist? It's because of Congress and because of conflicts of interest. Their goal is to be reelected, so if they get painted as being soft on terror or risking American lives for a few bucks, it'll be a detriment to the races. In other cases, some of these contractors are in their own districts. Less money for the contractor means less money for their district, which might lead to job cuts, which their opponent will use as a cudgel to beat them with. H.L. Mencken once warned, quote, "Never argue with the man whose job depends on not being convinced," end quote. Congressional hearings and committees make it seem like they want to be convinced, but they don't. They almost never are. There's a fundamental mismatch that's not likely to go away anytime soon. Defense manufacturing is a complex, specialized business. It requires a lot of research and development and significant expenditure just to get up and running. It's why I wouldn't begrudge the companies making all this money if they were delivering value. But come on, $52,000 for a trash can just because you can? It's ridiculous. Unfortunately, there's really no clear answer. We have 4 parties: the taxpayer, the Department of Defense, Congress, and the defense contractors. Who needs to move first? The contractors aren't going to settle for a smaller profit unless Congress makes some regulations and closes some loopholes, which they won't do because they want to hold on to power, which means the Department of Defense can't do anything and has to let the contractors run roughshod over them, which screws the taxpayers because they end up paying billions for bloat they don't need. What to do? That's the question. What do you think should happen? Leave your answers in the comments and I'll go over them in a future video. This is a complex topic with no easy answers.